Life can change in an instant. For many wheelchair users, the struggle to push forward is a daily challenge.
After years of development and countless prototypes, we created Rib Grips, the revolutionary wheelchair hand rim covers with built-in ribs for ultimate grip and comfort.
No more slick surfaces, no more heat burns, just pure, reliable grip. Rib Grips, empowering you to push forward with ease. Rib Grips, get a grip on your freedom. Discover the difference. Visit ribgrips.com and use promo code GRIP today. You just found the perfect product that helps with staying cool during hot summer runs. No more gross warm water. Stay cool with this product from Gear Handle. This hydration tube cover helps keep your water cool and easily accessible. Stay hydrated during those long summer runs or even delay from freezing in the winter. Plus, they're compatible with various brands of water bladders and come in various colors. Visit gearhandle.com and use promo code H2O today.
Welcome to the Lysten Podcast, where we discuss mental health and mental health-based tools to help you in your everyday life. I am your host, Mindy Hancock, an LPC associate in the state of Texas, and I am proud of you for tuning in today. Just a quick disclaimer, this podcast and the information it contains is not, nor is it intended to be form of therapy. If you are in need of therapy, please consult with a mental health practitioner in your area for advice. Now it's time to listen up. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lysten Podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. We have a guest today, and I think this is going to be a really good listen. It is longer than our usual episodes because it is a guest, and we have a really good conversation about sobriety and addiction. And I promise, if you have anyone in your life who has struggled with addiction, or maybe that is you, this is a story of hope and resilience, and I encourage you to listen. And a little bit about our guest today. After a successful career at KWTX Channel 10 and his already hit podcast, The Payoff Stories of Sobriety, Pete Sousa continues his passion as he works as an ESPN play-by-play broadcaster. Pete is a remarkable individual whose achievements go beyond the broadcasting realm. Pete has demonstrated immense bravery in his personal battles with addiction and has since devoted himself to inspiring others, as well as raising awareness about the dangers of addiction. So guys, settle in. This is going to be a great episode, and I hope you enjoy it. All right. Hey there, Pete. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to see you.
Yes, I'm so glad for you to be here and bring the value that I know you're going to bring to the podcast and the listeners. But usually when I have guests on, I always like to start off with two kind of fun questions just to kind of lighten the mood a little bit, and then we'll jump into the nitty gritty. But so first up, what is something you are celebrating or is going really well for you right now?
My gratitude and in like I'm my relationships with people and where I am in life as opposed to where I was. And we'll get into this, but my struggle with addiction, I feel like my relationships are real strong right now. And I have a lot of gratitude for that because, I had no relationships pretty much before I got sober. Yeah. So that is something that I'm really enjoying right now and celebrating. That's something I'm very happy about.
That's awesome. And like you said, we'll get into it, but addiction definitely does hinder relationships in lots of ways. So
yeah. And to the point where, my life is luckily big right now with a lot of people in it. And, sometimes it's nobody's that important, right? So it doesn't really, you try to get back to people and, I do a good job of that, but, if you can't satisfy every need, whether it's you or the other person in that relationship, stuff happens, but it's a lot better to be overwhelmed with that abundance than, I could have, all my relationships could have fit on this pinky finger. If you're just listening, I'm holding up my right pinky finger. That's all the room we had for relationships there.
Yeah. That's powerful to really think about the shift and the change. And so I can't wait till we get into that. So second fun question is, you're at a karaoke bar and a celebrity walks in. Who is the celebrity and what song would you choose to sing with them?
Okay. So I know right away this answer. It came right to me. it will be Dolly Parton, and we would sing "Islands in the Stream," and so I would sing Kenny Rogers' part,
Of
and
course.
I think it will be fantastic.
I agree. I mean, how could it not be? That would be awesome.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought.
I love it. I love it. So now that we have those fun questions out of the way, we're going to just jump in. But first, before we jump into just tell everybody who you are, like who is Pete Sousa? What do you do? And then we'll get into kind of more along your story, but just tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Yeah, I was born and raised outside of Philadelphia. Now I live in Central Texas, and I'm really on. By the time this comes out, I probably won't be on the news anymore. My last day is going to be July 31st. So yeah,
Wow.
it's like some relatively breaking news. It depends on what your definition of that is, but yeah. So my last day is going to be on the 31st, and at that time, and I've been doing this for a while now, shifting more into calling games, college basketball, football, and softball, or whatever allows, whatever opportunities I'm afforded to do, calling games, and that's going really well. That's something I'm celebrating too, because that continues to pick up, and also podcasting. What you're doing here, I do the same thing, about recovery and sobriety, and then another podcast I do that'll be every day in the fall, about sports.
Love that. That's
Yeah,
awesome. Well,
yeah.
I don't know if I mean, congratulations on the shift.
Yeah.
So
So
this
yeah, so
sounds,
it's great news. So I call games for ESPN, and I podcast too as well. So, and I'm really happy with that's something that, if you would have told me that that's what I would be doing when I was 13, I would have been like, I'm in. And so it's been a while since I've been 13, so it took me a while to get here. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that situation. Work, doing the news at Channel 10, it was awesome. I mean, I did it for 7 years, in the Waco area and surrounding, the whole market, like out by Fort Cavazos and stuff. But I'll tell you, we talk about life and how it's so weird how it works out. Like getting the opportunity to do the news really gave me the opportunity to round into form as like a broadcaster. It's like you talk about like your 10,000 hours, right? I think I may have accumulated that in my like TV news career, over the past, I guess it's like 9 years, and it really has positioned me for opportunities like a situation with ESPN when it comes up, because I've always known how to call games, and now I certainly know how to carry a broadcast. So it's weird how it all works together. I would have never saw myself getting into TV news. It was really awesome. I loved being able to be positive around what can be like kind of a dicey situation with news, and I love to cut up and have fun, and I think a lot of people enjoyed that, and I enjoyed people telling me that. So I will miss that, but I will not miss getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, I can't wait. I mean, that's
Yeah.
something I'm well aware that there'll be some things that I miss. But I'm also well aware that like it's time for a change, and other opportunities came into the picture that made that possible. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And we're going to get into your story of addiction, but just a side note real quick to think about just like the shift your life has taken. And I'm sure, like you said, the gratitude that you had earlier, but just to think about like where you were before, like during the deepest of your addiction, to where you are now, and to even think that this is where you would be, you probably couldn't have fathomed that at that point.
No, I used to sit on a bar stool and lie to people, about what I was doing and what I was going to do. And now my truth has far exceeded those lies. And some of those lies were grandiose. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be living in reality. I still have a lot more of what I want to do, and to develop continue as a person and a professional. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with what's going down.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's awesome. Let's go ahead and jump into a little bit of your story. So my first question is just, what's your earliest memory of addiction?
Well, that's a great question, and it's something that I've gotten introspective with all of this since I've gotten, sober, but my first memory was I was kind of part of, you and I are around the same age, and I was part of the first like generation of like, okay, does this kid have attention deficit? Are we going to put him on medicine?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was put on like Ritalin as a young man, and I can remember as a young man, as a kid, I can remember like being in third or fourth grade and like knowing that I had taken Ritalin, right? And knowing that like two things happened. I think I have the addictive gene. So there was like a chemical reaction in my brain that actually made me feel pretty good and feel like it. And this has, look, if kids see doctors and therapists and they're prescribed medicines, like go for it. This is just my story, my experience.
Right.
But I took that and I felt like, okay, like I'm enough now to do my work. I'm like, I can do it. And I also felt like that was an early thing in my life. Like, okay, I have to take something to be on par with everybody else. And I think that combination was certainly addiction, right? Especially the chemical reaction. Like no kid, no person is ready for that. Like just the physical reaction you have to substance. I was, and I did not, it's not like I didn't like it, but like that was, looking back now and talking to other people, way more powerful of an experience than other folks that were taking the same thing.
Right.
So that was my first, I was like in second or third grade.
Yeah. So then obviously like that was like the start of like you realizing that putting something into my body makes me feel different and makes me feel like I'm at the level of everybody else. I can socialize with them. I can keep up with them, whatever that looks like. So how did that translate into you being, a young man getting into like teenage years? What did that look like?
Well, I mean, it was one of those deals where, I had like, and this from what you do, working as a therapist with kids and stuff, like I was dyslexic as a kid, and I was certainly ADHD or whatever. I had like learning disabilities, like legitimately. And I mean, I still do to this day. I still, when I'm reading the news in the morning, I mean, sometimes the teleprompter, it comes up like backwards. But I still, now to the point where it's like we talked about earlier, I just figure it out. It's like no problem. But initially I felt like I was looking at a puzzle every morning. And then there was a stigma attached to, going to like a special reading van or whatever, because I wasn't up to snuff as like the other kids were with reading comprehension and stuff, and then math and all that. So when that was a really important thing for me, I think in my journey, like, okay, if I take this, I'll be up to par with everybody else. And so the same thing happened with drinking. That's what it looked like in my teenage years, to answer your question, because I was like a real happy little kid. I had a great life. I had great parents. Like I have no like misgivings about the opportunities I was afforded as a kid. And I was happy. I mean, I love sports. I loved like being around it, and I was given a lot of opportunities to be around it. But I think that one thing I was developing my self-esteem, like everybody at that age is, right? I mean, I was nervous to talk to girls. I felt awkward, like in those settings. And the moment I drank, all that went away. I mean, where other people, and everybody's got their own like bag of hammers to carry around, right? So other people are dealing with other stuff. But for me, that alleviated all those insecurities and all those fears. And I think with other people I know for a fact, people I know, like they drank and then they had one or two, and then they continued on their journey, right? Developing as a person, developing that like confidence, which really, as we learn, comes along with life experience. But I like press pause on all those experiences by, okay, as a teenager, I started to drink and I was like, I can't wait till I get to do this again. So like all week long, even in high school, like you're planning how I'm going to drink on Friday and Saturday, which was not normal.
Right.
On Tuesday, where are we going to go?
Exactly.
To do this again. Yeah. So that was a big thing. Also, I always say this, and if you're a kid and you can relate to this, then you might want to keep an eye on it. When I was in 8th grade, going to the dance, I was terrified. And then I started to drink a little bit in 9th grade, and I couldn't wait to get to the dance. I was so excited.
Yeah.
That was a change, like that almost was like I tell people those were like my first spiritual experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kind of weird, but that's how it was.
Yeah. So it's like when people call it like liquid courage, that's really what it was for you. Like it gave you the courage, it gave you the confidence to be around others, be around peers, and feel as though like you're quote unquote in air quotes fitting in with others.
Totally. Yeah. And then honestly, and then you of course overshoot the mark. Then you think, oh, I'm the best at this socializing. I mean, it's like it's the biggest mind F that has ever out. Addiction it's just such a scam. I mean, in a sense, like it's your brain's just completely scamming you. It's a huge lie. It's the biggest lie that I've ever been told. Like it was that I need this to be this. It's not true. I can tell you with 12 years of sobriety that's a lie.
Yeah. So we talked about like you started earliest memory would be ADHD medication. We get into teen years, you're dabbling in like drinking, and it's kind of like making you feel like, hey, I'm one of everybody else. I can do this. I'm having a good time. I'm like the life of the party. I imagine that this is how I'm imagining it. I'm the life of the party. But then it started to kind of have a hold on you. Like, okay, how can I get to Friday? And so how did that transpire into graduating high school, going to college? Like, obviously I would think that it's going to get worse at that point because you have easier access at that point. You're not having to go to, your junior year in high school on a Monday. Yeah. You were probably drinking more often.
You can do whatever you want, whenever you want it. Yeah. I had like an interesting situation because my consequences hit probably earlier than most alcoholics and drug addicts. I mean, I put together like a nice high school football career, and I was big enough and I kind of filled into my body where I got a scholarship to play football at the University of Richmond, like a full scholarship. And so I'm getting ready to go to Richmond. I'm like rising freshman year of college, right? So it's going into the summer of my senior year, and I'm just playing in this Philadelphia, where I'm from, high school all-star game, and they wanted to give me a physical before the game, and they realized that I had an arrhythmia. So I was getting this physical, and the doctor said, look, you can't play in this all-star game until you get your heart checked out by a cardiologist. I go to see a cardiologist, and the cardiologist is just like, they give me all the tests, and he is like, I could see it in his face that there was an issue. And the issue was that I had this thing called cardiomyopathy, which I was told I was never going to play football again. And I had an enlarged left ventricle, and really it's a godsend that they found that out before something were to happen to me on a football field where I was to fall out or who knows, much worse. But they said that part of this, they said, oh, this could be viral cardiomyopathy. The doctor told me straight, hey, this could also be through like alcohol and abuse of drugs, and it could be the combination of everything, right? You had a virus for the past like 4 or 5 months going through your body. You weren't ever allowing it to like go away because you kept beating your body down. Because at this point, my second semester, my senior year, I was just doing whatever I could to put whatever I could in my body. I thought I was invincible, and I was addicted. And that was my first, my whole life I had worked up to this point to be an athlete and to go to college and play football. And, every kid thinks they're going to go to the NFL that really loves football and is getting good feedback on it. And so I remember that the doctor was like, you could have gotten it through alcohol and I was like, oh, it was the virus, 100%, like right away. I'm like, oh, over there. So, and then that did kind of slow me down from taking any kind of like any pills or anything like that. But at the same time, when you're an addict and you go to college and you're drinking, like, for me, in my experience, like there's no like, oh, like if I stop smoking pot, like I'll be, I'll get better. If you're an addict, you're an addict. Like you got to stop it all, and until I stopped it all. I was unable to get healthy. So I kind of just muddled through college. I was very fortunate that the University of Richmond kept me on scholarship. So those coaches really kind of kept the guardrails up around me. They did everything they could. They were just like, we got to get this guy graduated and out of here. So they succeeded. And in that sense, college was a pretty good experience for me because I was affiliated with that team. And again, like there was structure to my life. But then when, that structure went away after college, it was pretty much free fall.
Yeah. So even though you were fortunate enough to still, like you said, stay on that scholarship. So that was good because that structure, even though as an addict, it still probably helped you kind of range you in a little bit because you had some sort of structure, some sort of accountability. But then once all of that ended and you had no accountability.
When you're dealing with the college football experience, like, there are literally, it's almost like having a personal assistant, but like the worst personal assistant ever because they're like mean to you. But like, if you don't go to class that there could possibly be a coach there waiting for you to check you in. So you'd better go. And so like all of that accountability was important for me, right? But once that went away, like I told you, it was off the rails.
Yeah. So then at that point, once all the accountability was gone, you were out on your own. Yeah. Obviously, a fresh graduate of college. Did your addiction shift in a way where you now at this point starting and trying different drugs? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, I was, and it goes back to what I told you about being a kid with that Adderall. That speed really spoke to my brain. And that the combination of that and alcohol was really, that was what I was into. Even looking back when I played high school football, like now I wasn't even prescribed for this drug anymore, but I would take it. If I would take it before I played a game, I would play amazing. So at least like the mind would tell you that you did. So that was another thing. Like I got to take this to be on par with everyone else. So I was always into that feeling that I got from those drugs. And so once cocaine came into the picture, that was like, it was like with alcohol, it was like French fries with ketchup, pretty much. Like there was never really one without the other. And, in a weird way, it was almost a blessing because it accelerated my downward spiral and enabled me to hit rock bottom much earlier, and I could tell you all the stories, but the situation really is, you didn't want me around if I was drinking and using, like I was, even if like I got, I had several good jobs, like I ascended through a few industries, but like every time it was going to crash and burn. Every time the addiction was going to show up, even if you hired me and, I worked in the NBA for a few teams doing public relations, and like each one of those situations would start off with like 6 months of like great Pete, like coming to work, like being accountable, like it's just being conscientious. And because I knew that if I let it go, it was going to go. But eventually I would let it go. And then it would go. So when I say let it go, I mean, okay, I can drink a little more, I can do some drugs. And it was always, the end was always pretty bad. And so eventually I got that gift of desperation, in my 30s, in my early 30s. And, that's when everything changed for me.
Yeah. So obviously it really is, I don't know what the right word is because I don't want to say cool, but it's to see how your addiction just like just kept compiling on top of each other. That's really what it was. And so at your highest,
it's impressive. I mean, the way that addiction can completely just grab a hold of you and really have you. I mean, look, I'll tell you right now, like I have sitting here today talking to you, like alcohol is not going to jump down my throat. Like I work a program, like that hold of me, like I know that I'm powerless over alcohol, but at the same time now I'm free of that. I'm totally free of that feeling. And I can go and do and be wherever I need to be if I have a single purpose, right? So, don't feel sorry for an addict, like, oh, they're a victim or whatever. Yeah, there's some of that. I do believe it's a disease. And the fact that when I was able to wrap my mind around the fact that it is a disease, it made it much easier for me to recover.
Yeah.
Like, hey, like, you have a disease, like, and then I was like, no, I don't. And then they're like, actually, the American Medical Association says you do. Um, I'm like, oh, okay. And then I was in treatment, and they put brain. It was almost like the old school. It's your brain on drugs, Mindy. It was like, like, here's your brain. Right now as you enter rehab, right? I mean, and they showed like that frontal lobe or whatever it is, was just kind of like charred. It was like it had been like almost like people had picked off parts of it with a gun.
Yeah.
And then it said, okay, here's your brain in 6 months. Here's your brain in a year. Here's your brain in 18 months. And I remember looking at the one in 18 months or a year. And I asked like one of the counselors, like, should you tell me in like a year, I'll be able to go to a movie, have like popcorn and a soda and candy and basically kind of feel the same way I did when I was a kid. Because by the time a year is, your brain's like almost back to normal. And the guy, yeah, I remember I was like, but I'm in, like, I can do this. And I can tell you, like, that 6 months into sobriety was just so enjoyable. 3 months in, I mean, I was working a hardcore program.
Right.
That was super important to me. To basically, I went to a lot of meetings. I worked with a sponsor. I still do today. Do both of those things. I always can go to more meetings because, I had a sponsor tell me once, don't let the gifts of sobriety get in the way of the gifts of sobriety, because you do have more on your plate now. At least I do. And so, when I got sober, I had the gift of unemployment, and which is great because you have a lot of time to get sober. And even if you don't have any money, you get a job. I worked at a Kentucky Fried Chicken when I was in a halfway house after I'd worked in the NBA, and I thought I knew how to do that job, but I'm working at KFC and I can't work the register. It's like terrified, like there's long lines. There's long lines at KFC, and I'm like running to the bathroom, like that fight or flight. People are like, dude, where are you going? We got like 20 people in this line. I'm like a
I'm out.
30-year-old looking at KFC, like panicked. It's crazy. So I was very fortunate though to have the opportunity to just really get into recovery. But yeah, back to what you said. That was a long little tangent I went on. But yeah, it is a monster. Addiction is a monster, but like, it is impressive how it can just grab you and crush you. But at the same time, it's even more impressive of how you can break free from it and live like the freest life ever without any kind of alcohol or drugs. Like I want no part of like drinking or drugs, but like, and there was a time when I thought like there's no way I can live without it. But there is a great way you can live without it.
Yeah. And speaking of that, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, now that you don't have drugs or alcohol to get you that high that you were chasing for so long, what do you do now? Like, what's your form of like a natural high to like the things that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. That's really connecting with people on like a deeper level. It's like, sure, in life you're gonna small talk. I have a buddy who thinks he's like a 5-star small talker. That's why he's like the best. I'm like, okay, fine. Well, you can be awesome at that. But we all have to deal with small talk at times. It's just life, and it's fine, and it's sometimes that's enjoyable. But if I'm gonna get like a deep like connection with someone and be honest with them, and I'm vulnerable with them about what's really going on in my life, and they're vulnerable with me, and we're talking about real things in life.
Yeah.
And you feel the needle moving in the right direction for both of those people. I mean, a lot of times this is a conversation about recovery with another addict, like someone tells me really what's going on with them and I tell them really what's going on with me. That gives me the juice that alcohol and drugs used to. I mean, even talking to you about this, when I talk about this stuff, it really fills me up with just a lot of gratitude, a lot of like, and for me, like working a program of recovery, like there's a higher power involved. And like when I turn my will over to that higher power, or I realize that like, I'm going through something really difficult and it's on repeat in my brain. I can't shake it. Like
Yeah.
this person or this situation now has got beachfront real estate in my brain. And to turn that over to God, I call my higher power God, to turn that over to God and to kind of be free of it, is an amazing thing, and it makes me feel good. And it's not easy to do that. Like
Right.
you have to, like anything else, you have to practice doing that. And after like 11, 12 years of being sober, I can turn things over to God now, and it's that release is much quicker because I have all this experience. I'll tell you a quick story about it, kind of turning things over to God. I have a buddy in recovery in Waco, really wise man. And he tells a story about, he's a successful guy, and was buying a new house, and his daughter and is helping him kind of clear things out of the old house. And she says he picks up this box. She picks up this box. It's like a shoe box. And she says, what's in this box? She could tell there's like index cards in there, and there's like a slit at the top where he can slide in the cards. And he says, oh, that's my God box. And he's like, if there's something on my mind that I'm overwhelmed about, or if I can't stop thinking about it, I'll write it on the index card, I'll put it in the box, and I give it to God. And then she asked the next question. She says, well, what's in here? Do you want to look? He's like, honestly, I have no idea what's in there. And that's an example of the things that overwhelm us on a daily basis are really forgettable items that we don't even remember. Like, we don't remember a week later, let alone like, a year later when that God box is full. And so that is something that I've experienced in my life of recovery, where it's like, now I give things to God and I have the confidence that like, okay, he's going to take them. That's one. And two, it's like, this situation doesn't even matter. Like I'm wrapped around the axle about something that is completely driven by my ego, or, someone else's imperfections have brought their warts to the surface, and it's all a bunch of nonsense. Just turn it over and keep going on with the day. Because when I'm like self-absorbed and thinking about self-pity, then that's selfish. There's a lot of other stuff I could be doing with my time that could be beneficial to the overall society.
Right. And that's a powerful thing, like just learning to let things go. And even still, like, I think it has a lot to do with, even though previously in the height of your addiction, you were from the outside very much out of control, but you felt in control of your addiction. Like, okay, I can control drinking and doing drugs. I can control this.
Yeah.
You felt in control, even though you were not in control. But now learning that, hey, it's okay if I can't control things. I just need to let them go, give them to God, whatever that looks like for you, and release them and say, like, I can't always control everything. And that's okay. I don't have to turn to something in order to feel like I can control it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, you bring up an amazing point. It's like knowing that I'm not in control is one of the most freeing things for me, like ever. Like my girlfriend, she is constantly like, she feels like she needs to manage a lot of situations because she does. Like she's responsible for a lot of work. She has 2 kids she's responsible for. And I always, we complement each other well. And like, she's kind of maybe uptight and I'm kind of maybe laid back, maybe sometimes too laid back, right? And there's something to be said for that. But I'm always trying to remind her when the opportunity arises. Nobody wants to hear, unsolicited advice. So I stay away from that. But hey, like, it's just bigger than us, and the more we can realize that and understand there's a relief in that, knowing that we're not in control. It's a beautiful thing to understand that. Like, and every time I go into a meeting of recovery, I'm tipping my cap to my higher power and being like, I'm not in charge. And even that brings a gratitude and humility to like the everyday proceedings,
Yeah. It the power in letting go it's so, it can be so hard, but that just the release of it and saying, this isn't mine to carry. Like I can't control it. So instead of sitting with it and worrying about it and allowing it to consume us, just letting it go and saying, I'm gonna let him take it, like move on, then that's the best place to be. So one of the things you said about like connection and having deep relationships.
You're very good at this. Very good at this.
And having deep relationships. One of the things I wanted to ask you is during that like highest part of your addiction or throughout your addiction journey, like who did you hurt the most during your addiction?
Oh, my mom, for sure. I mean, because she was just the most invested. I mean, she was the most like worried. She was the most tuned in to me, because we have that connection, like as a son and a mother, like where she knew that I had become like wayward. She knew that addiction was so in our family that
Right.
like she was, on my dad's side, right? She's seen it in him and she was seeing it in me. My two other brothers both got sober. My brother Kevin passed away last year from cancer at 52.
Wow.
Which is, I still, it's hard to be at peace with that. I mean, it's tough to be at peace with that, but at the same time, he died sober. And that legacy he leaves in me and all the messages he left with me. And that, like, I carry that, like every day he's in me, and, it's never, there's still a missing seat, a chair, whatever, spot in bed where like that'll never change.
Right.
But his sobriety, the fact that he got sober, left a beautiful mark on the world. And, so my mom got to see us all turn it around. My brother Michael, and then me, and then, I always say like maybe she's able to rest easy now after like decades of not sleeping. Yeah, I mean, if you talk to people, right? I mean, the situation, like it's like the worst fear that you will this situation will come into your life where, by no control of your own, your children become addicted to something. And now it's like, I'll truthfully, and I'm not trying to be like a scary, like somebody speaking from like a pulpit, but like with the fentanyl and stuff out there right now,
Yeah.
like it's a war zone. Like you can't, like, even when I first got sober, but even then it was really bad with heroin and stuff. Like, but like you come into a meeting, an AA meeting or a 12-step meeting, but you have a problem with heroin or with taking street drugs, you don't know what they are, like you go back out, you may not come back. Like you say, okay, I'm going to try drinking again. Well, drinking leads you to whatever your drug of choice is, and now you're searching for fentanyl, or you're not searching for fentanyl, right? But it comes into your life, like, and you're gone like that. Like it's even scarier now than it ever was before. So I really feel for, for parents that have that situation, because that feels out of control, right? And that's the worst out of, yeah. And that's painful.
So I have a question on that. So a lot of times, when we have someone we love who's in addiction, let's think from your mom's perspective too. She's seeing her son who's battling addiction, and it's one thing to love them through it. It's another thing to, like, sometimes we feel like we're loving them through it and sometimes we're enabling them. Was there ever a moment that you felt like your mom was like, I love you, but I can't enable this behavior. Like, you've got to figure this out. Like, what did that look like? What was that?
My parents, I mean, in my experience, clearly it worked for me. They were, the situation was like this pretty much. Like if you are even showing the desire to be sober, you can be around us, you can stay with us, right? Even if addiction robbed you of everything. But if you're not on that program and you think you're going to come here and hang out and just like go out and drink and whatever, then like there's no room at the inn for that, right? Like the moment I told my parents, like, hey, I'm ready. It's so funny, right? Would they say when you're an alcoholic, like, or an addict, like you're the last to know? You really are. It's hilarious. Like one night I walked in and I was like, I think I want to go to rehab. They were like, about time, Yeah, because it was really the one thing I'd never tried. And because I never thought I was that bad, right? When it was clear that I was as bad as you could be. But so that, and they were willing to like, okay, like, let's make that happen. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like when I needed help, they were there. I think every parent enables a little bit. I just do, because I think that there is, as a parent, there's a power there that, you can't describe it, right? You know it. You
Right.
can't. It's just, I don't know how you would navigate that space. I know the one way that, as you, I think parents, the only thing they can do is take action for their
Mm-hmm.
own recovery through the situation, which is working with a therapist, going to Al-Anon meetings, being open and honest with someone who's a professional or somebody else who's walking the same journey with you about what's going on with
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah.
Then gaining, you know, uh, just some clarity from that, so you can at least do the right things. One thing a therapist told me that I share with other people when they come to me, like friends of mine who have a kid in addiction and they're like, I don't know what to do. Look, like if you're listening to this and you have a child, or a teenager or somebody who's going through addiction, um, the next time when they hit bottom, you know, um, if you can be prepared with an executable game plan, right? Like, because we hit bottom as alcoholics, and we're like, you do wake up in the morning with shame, you're in crisis, and sometimes you will reach out for help because you feel desperate, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's 9 in the morning. Now, if we tell someone close to us, I'm desperate right now, I think I need help, and they're like, all right, well, the car's coming in 10 minutes, or we're going to take you right now to this detox we've talked about taking you to. Let's go. We're ready. And then you're like, you get in the car, and the next thing you know, you're there. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we're usually ready to drink again.
Right.
There are those moments when we reach out for help. If a plan is in place to get this person to somewhere where they could be safe and maybe work this out, like those are opportunities,
Right.
small windows for
Yeah.
people to really help that loved one get the treatment they need.
Yeah, because they say all the time, you can't help someone that's not ready to be helped.
No, you can't. You can't. But when that person's your child or someone you love, or even, I deal with people who have siblings in, addiction, like my brothers did with me. They didn't know what to do. I mean, and it was kind of cool. They both acted, my oldest brother, Kevin, was kind of like, he just, he was like, he's a therapist, or, like, so he was like, yeah, I just have to consider him like almost off the planet right now, because that's how I can move forward with this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Again, like Kevin was the same way. If I called him and told him I was going to get sober, like he was all about it. But if I called him with some other stuff, like he wanted nothing to do with it. Michael was a little more geographically responsible, because by the time I bottomed out, I was in Philadelphia and he was like right up the street.
Mm-hmm.
So he really kind of put together, like, if you want to call it an intervention, I mean, do they call it an intervention when there's 3 of you? Because that's like all who was left. There were like 4 of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember he said, I don't want you to see my children, and I don't want you to see Cade. And Cade at the time was his stepson, who I knew he didn't like. And I was like, good Lord, like, he doesn't even want me to see Cade? I'm like, he didn't even like Cade. That was a situation where I was like, wow, this is getting really bad.
Right.
Yeah, but that
So,
helped.
so you mentioned like, I know that you can like, you mentioned like maybe having a moment where you're in crisis and you kind of feel like you need help, but then you go right back to the addiction. What was that last straw for you? What was the ultimate rock bottom?
Well, I mean, it was almost like rock bottom. I had been in rock bottom for like 2 years, and I was so out of it, I really didn't even know it, right? And I'll tell you the truth, I was connected enough with people in the line of work I was in sports and pro sports, where like I kept getting like these like short-term jobs where I could like convince myself that I was okay, right? But I wasn't. And eventually I was just like, I was in a point where I was at a position where, I mean, it was really happenstance. There was like, again, I was in rock bottom, and this guy I asked to be my temporary sponsor was like, hey, let's go. I'll pick you up for a meeting, but he picked me up and he was like, we're going to go to dinner. And I was like, oh God, I got to sit across from this guy. Like, I really wasn't ready to get sober.
Yeah.
I was I was on like drugs of some kind, you know. I'm
Mhm.
out to dinner with this guy, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh boy. And the guy looked at me, Mindy. He had a year sober, and he just shared his experience. But he did maybe like, he was just like, look, dude, I think you should go to rehab. He was like, that's what I did. And he's like, and like this, I tell people like the smallest like window opened up for me, like like the God window, and I just
Mhm.
like rolled through on the other side. And I went home, like I mentioned you. I told my parents, "Hey, I want to go to rehab." They were like, "About time."
Mhm.
And then before I knew it, I was in a place where I was getting the help that I needed. And at that point, I mean, I was 1,000% in. I mean, there were, when I went from like this nice posh rehab to like a halfway house, I was like, oh my God, I don't want
Right.
to do it. I opened up the top drawer at the halfway house, and there was a bowl of dried out spaghetti. I was like,
Yum.
oh, woof, and the first night there, I'm in a room with three guys. One guy is waking up and smoking in the room, and this other guy's snoring like a chainsaw. And I'm in the top bunk, like crying myself to sleep, like I can't believe. But I had to buy in there. Like I had to follow suggestions. I had to do what people told me to do. And my life got internally, right? So much like the outsides, which by the way, if you're really working a good program, that doesn't matter. Like internally, I was on fire.
Mhm.
And ultimately, people could see that
Yeah.
coming. It's undeniable when you're around somebody who's really in recovery. Um, and sometimes you have to see it for yourself, but it's like, oh, wow, this person really is like, there's something happening here. And when you
Mhm.
can put together a few years of that, then things start to come together, even on the outside. And maybe even earlier than that. It's really amazing how it works.
Yeah. I mean, we know that there's a lot of people out there that go to rehab more than one time. They go multiple
Oh,
times
yeah.
before it actually they're 100% in and they're ready to do this. So, what would you say, like if someone's listening right now that's either in addiction, or wanting, maybe they're starting their rehab journey, or maybe they have someone in their family that's going through this, and maybe they have had times in rehab where maybe they relapse after. What
Yeah.
would you tell them? Like, what would be your advice to someone who's either in addiction right now or wanting to get sober, or someone who's watching their loved one do that, go through this?
If you feel like you're hopeless, you're not,
Mhm.
okay? But at the same time, you know, you don't even know that you have hope sometimes. Like, right? So if you're just that fried and you think you're hopeless, okay, get your, pardon my language here, ass moving. Like
Right.
action. Like take action. Like if you take the right steps and take action in your life, you will start to feel the vibrations of that come with sobriety. And then you will feel that hope. Like I see the hope in people, but they don't feel it because they're fried. I know it because I was hopeless. But when you actually, action is something you can control. You
Mhm.
can take action to go to a meeting, to stay in recovery, and that will make you feel better. And like beyond your wildest dreams is out there. Like, so basically, like I always say, like, there's always hope. There truly is always hope. Stop fighting this thing. It's amazing what happens to an addict's life is like, I can only speak to my experience, but like you have this small, your life is done, right? Like it's like
Mhm.
you have this small life that's like you can fit in a book bag. Um, and people are like, powerful people, regular people, whoever, they're like, hey, we want to help you. Like, you have a situation. And you're like, no, I'm good. Just me and my book bag of stuff. Like, you have this ugly little part of the world that's like you could fit into a thimble and you're protective of it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's total insanity, So, like, once you can break free from that and start to follow, for me, it was follow suggestions. Once I got into recovery, like that was one thing. But then when I was in recovery, I really had to take direction and
Mhm.
realize I was not in charge. Um, and I had to become teachable again. And I had to stop fighting too. So I would say stop fighting, right? Forget about your little book bag or thimble of stuff. Like stop fighting and embrace like the abundance of like the joy in the world that's out there for you.
Right.
That comes from no longer fighting. And it comes from taking action too. And it comes from being hopeful. Like there's always hope.
Yeah. And I think it also comes with being able to accept the support and the help. And that sometimes it's really hard because that takes away your control that we talked earlier.
Yeah. And by the way, some of this stuff, I mean, all of this stuff, like the one thing, this is really the only thing in my life that I'm an expert in is my recovery. These are not opinions. This is what happened to me. You know, like this is all stuff that I did. Like,
Right.
so I'm a living, breathing example of what I'm telling people about. I don't like opinions either. You know, talk to me about like something you did research on, or something somebody else did research on, or what your experience is, and that's
Right.
what I'm saying today.
Yeah. So during this recovery, obviously we know that it's not always rainbows and sunshine. Like there's hard times, there's things that are really difficult. So how do you, even 12 years in, stay focused and positive when things kind of rattle you a little bit, or maybe make you kind of like shift your mindset a little bit?
Well, the good part is, right, it goes back to what I said, like if you are working a solid program of recovery, you have the people around you in your life who are supposed to be around you. When these things happen, these unfortunate things that maybe you didn't even cause, right? Like you have a support group, and you're just not taking yourself too seriously if you're working a program that's like, you know, if you're really in like the sunlight of the spirit, as I call it. So I mean, crazy stuff happens, and the initial reaction is always, "Oh my God, my life is over. Like this is it." And then it's like 60 seconds later, I can laugh at it and be like, "Man, like this is quite the hand I've been dealt here by God. Like he's having a pretty good laugh. Like, you know, I've gotten through every single bad thing, terrible thing, tragedy that's happened to me." In sobriety, and I've gotten through it without a drink. And the more you go through those experiences, the better prepared you are for the next one. Right. I mean, and when I say that, I mean, there's an understanding. Like I got through my brother dying at 52. We didn't even really, like, it happened so fast.
Yeah.
It was like it's hard to describe, right? But there was a pain like that was so sharp inside my soul and still lingers there today. And I found a way to you know, I'm still here, right? And I drank. Like there's a way to get through things without drinking. And because honestly, like you go through those experiences and they will happen to someone else in recovery if you stay the path. And so at some point you're able to share with them what you went through when they're going through it. Like we become messengers, which is way better than becoming a drunk again, who just becomes selfish and you know, is deteriorating.
Yeah. And I feel like this all comes back to that connection piece, like connecting to others, showing that there's hope, showing them your experiences, letting them know that like, I've been through it. This is hard, but you're strong. You can keep moving forward. And so like, it all comes back to that connection piece that you're talking about at the beginning.
Yeah. And like you said, you know, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. Like there are days when I feel like worthless and useless, and I try to take a nap, but I can't take a nap. So I'm just lying in the dark for 3 hours, and all the voices in my head start to speak up, and I'm legit out of my mind by 1 p.m. You know, I'm like, what? But then again, I step back and laugh. I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
Right.
The power of, you know, that dark passenger in your head. If you give him a voice, like, trust me, he's got plenty to say.
100%. And they like it likes to always pick the most unopportune time to decide to start speaking. I'm like, not now. Calm down.
That is one of those things too, Mindy, like the same thing as like the monster that addiction is. Like that, I call it like the dark passenger. It's just I'm absolutely like fascinated by the power that can have, or that we think we can have, or that we can give it, right? When in reality, it's just a bunch of nonsense that you just got to let go of, you know? And really at that point, it's the same thing. You get into action, you pick up the phone, you call someone that you trust and tell them about those crazy thoughts, and you're both laughing about them. Right. You know, that's a better way to work it out than trying to figure it out yourself. Like that doesn't
Right.
work.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of again, giving some tips and tricks to other people who are listening on today, just in case they're in addiction or know someone that is, are there any, we talked about, you said working the program, and I do want to talk a little bit more about that, but are there any particular strategies or tools that you've adopted that have really helped you in your, like, just maintaining your sobriety, whatever that looks like? It could be any kind of like routine or habit that you have, anything that has really helped you.
I'm pretty fortunate that I have a lot of people in my life who are sober. So like I have a pretty strong network, right? And so I think the more you work on like those relationships, where it's like when something happens to me, like we were just talking about, I know who to call right away, and I can get it off my chest. Like I don't like, the phone's not 1,000 pounds for me to call people who I love and are in sobriety, and that's really important.
Yeah.
It's like, look, consumption of alcohol, once you, and that's why I said at the very beginning of this conversation, like, look, it's called the phenomenon of craving. Like if I have an alcoholic drink today, right? If I put a drink in my body, like all bets are off, like, because like the phenomenon of craving kicks in, right? But that would be, for really at this point in my life, and for anybody who's away from it for that long, in my experience talking to people, like that will be a decision, um, like, but after that decision is made, I have no power. I'm powerless, and that craving kicks in, and I'm on a run. I mean, and doesn't mean I'm going to get arrested tonight, but like eventually the roof's going to cave in, and I think that would be one thing I would tell people, is just know that, like, when you're sober, like you do have choices come into your life, and like it's amazing to be able to have a choice. Like when you're in addiction, you really have lost your ability to make any choices. That's not true of sobriety. And for me, it's relationships with people. Pick up the phone and call them, and go to meetings. I mean, I go to AA. It's saved my life, because it gives me the 12 steps have given me a blueprint for living. I didn't know how to live really until I got sober. I felt like I could get the owner's manual, and now I feel like I've got it, and I have a place to go. And it's just not all that deep. I need help. And by admitting I need help, and by going and humbling myself or whatever, by going to a meeting or talking to another alcoholic or hitting my knees to pray.
Yeah.
I mean, all that stuff works.
So what I'm hearing is support system number one, and let your ego go. And say it's okay to need help. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on others. It's okay that you don't have it all under control.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I said you're good.
Well, so I want to say thank you, first of all, for just giving the gift of your experience on this podcast, because I think it's going to help a lot of people to hear what you've been through, and your story of, like, truly it is hope and it's resilience, and that it's not over. Like, your life is not over. You have the ability, like you said, to finally make that choice and decide to get sober. And like you said, it's not rainbows and sunshine, but it's the choice that you make to decide to do that for yourself. And so I mean, I love hearing your story. I've heard it before, and I love hearing it because it's so powerful. And I feel like to just see, like, to know what you've been through and then where you are now, it's a really cool, like, started from the bottom, now we're here kind of situation.
Totally,
yeah. So, like, it's just really, really cool. And I really do appreciate you coming and speaking on here and telling your story. Any last words that you want to give the listeners, or anything that you want to leave them with?
I would just say, the one thing that I am, just don't take yourself too seriously. Like, if you're trying to get sober, or, like, take that seriously, take your recovery, treat it as life and death, but don't take yourself too seriously. Like, that's the one thing I'll tell you. Like, that's the gift of sobriety, is realizing that you're not the center of the universe. You can actually detach from being the center of the universe, and you can have a real good time enjoying life. And, when I'm around somebody who's like nutty, if I'm in the right frame of mind, I'm always like, wow, I wonder what they're going to do next. Like, this is a wild situation where it's not like you get so captivated and now you're attached to them in the situation. It's like, no, like it's become such a beautiful ride.
Yeah.
Not taking myself too seriously in situations around me, because when I do take myself too seriously, I know I'm setting myself up for a real like kick in the ass, whether it's coming from my ego or whatever. I know how that ends every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not that deep. Just like you got to get out of your own head.
Deep. It ain't all that deep. And that's really a great way to put it. It's just not that deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and
no problem, Mindy.
hearing your story. I really enjoyed it. And I know the listeners will too. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you and connect with you and see more of what you're doing?
Sure. It's not hard to find me, like Pete Sousa on like Instagram and social media.
Okay.
All that stuff. And if you have questions or whatever, I always tell people just DM me or whatever. It's funny. Like, I can get questions about anything, but if I get questions about addiction, that's what I want to talk about. That's really is what makes me tick. Like talking about recovery. And anybody that has any questions about that, just let me know.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you guys in the next show.
Are you a podcaster? Let's talk podcast hosting. Are you tired of your current podcast host? Need real support in a community that gets it? At Rogue Media Network, we offer top-tier podcast hosting services to help you thrive. From hosting and distribution to dedicated support, we've got you covered. Starting as low as $25 a month. Join our community of passionate podcasters today. Contact us at hello@roguemedianetwork.com.